My favorite part about doing lens reviews is sharing new and exciting camera gear with you. But I also love that these reviews push me to go out and explore new places to capture test footage for these videos. Sometimes, a piece of gear comes along that makes me even more excited to go out and shoot, and in this case, I'm talking about a pair of anamorphic zoom lenses from Laowa. In this video, I'm going to tell you about my time using the Laowa Anamorphic 28-55 and 50-100 zoom lenses, including what you can expect out of them and what it's like to use them. Before discussing their characteristics, what's amazing about these lenses is that they're anamorphic zoom lenses that are not only relatively affordable, but they're also small and lightweight. These lenses weigh under just 3.5 pounds each and are just under 7.3 inches long. It's honestly remarkable to think that Laowa has squeezed anamorphic internals into lenses that are just about the same size and weight as most non-anamorphic cinema zoom lenses in a similar price range. Now, speaking of pricing, the Laowa Nanomorph zooms are currently on Indiegogo with early bird pricing set at just a hair under $3,000 per lens, or at just under $5,000 for the pair. I would expect there to be a slight bump in pricing once these lenses make their way onto B&H or other retailers. Both the 28-55 and 50-100mm lenses open up to t2.9 and stop down to t22. The pair of lenses that I receive for testing are in PL mount, but Laowa has told me that they will be available in E, RF, Z, X, and L mounts as well. The Laowa Anamorph zooms have a build quality you should expect from a $3,000 lens. They are well-built, all-metal body lenses. They have all of the features you should expect from a cinema zoom: geared focus, iris, and zoom rings that are ultra smooth, consistent gearing positions, and they have a built-in lens support mount, which oddly I didn't receive in the package sent to me. The focus throw on these lenses is 270 degrees, making for precise adjustments, whether by hand or with a fizz system. Like I always say, for solo operation, I find that 270 degrees is a sweet spot when pulling focus by hand. The Laowa Nanomorph zooms are also parfocal, which means that when you move throughout the zoom range, the focus point remains the same. This allows you to pull off things like dolly or crash zooms or subtle zoom pulls without having to reacquire focus. If you've watched any of my previous reviews on zoom lenses, you may have heard me talk about how a zoom lens being parfocal is vital for filming run-and-gun jobs like documentaries. The Nanomorph zooms have a 1.5x squeeze factor. I have to admit, I wasn't exactly blown away by the 1.5 squeeze factor when I first read the spec sheet from Laowa. Normally, the lower the squeeze factor, the less anamorphic character you're likely to get out of the lens. However, considering the price and size, there have to be some compromises made here. When you hear the word anamorphic, you might think oval bokeh and horizontal flares. Many anamorphics bring a level of distinct, dirty, interesting character to the shot that a spherical lenses often don't. In fact, anamorphic lenses are often known for the distortion that they bring to the image. In the case of the Laowa Nanomorphs, they have a slight pincushion distortion. I personally feel that the pincushion distortion flattens the shot out a bit. Of course, these lenses have the always interesting horizontal flaring that anamorphic lenses provide. One of the most interesting aspects of the Laowa Nanomorph zoom lenses is that they're available in 3 different flare colors. The Nanomorph zooms come in blue flares, which are synonymous with anamorphic lenses, amber flares, which add a wonderful warm look to all of the flaring, and then the silver option, which takes on the color of the light source. Overall, the flaring is predictable and not over the top. If you're looking for lenses that flare like crazy, these aren't the ones. Another common characteristic of anamorphic lenses is the distinct oval bokeh. I found that the bokeh was consistent throughout the focal range and zoom ranges and gave a pleasing, interesting look and feel. Regarding sharpness, wide open, the 28-55 is decently sharp. It begins to really sharpen up at T4. There is some slight chromatic aberration when wide open, but this is something that you should come to expect with budget-friendly anamorphic lenses. The 50-100 has fairly decent sharpness when wide open, and like its sibling, it also sharpens up at T4. However, compared to the 28-55, I noticed the overall softness of the 50-100, which might explain why I tend to gravitate towards it. Like the 28-55, there is some chromatic aberration when shooting wide open, but it does clean up when you stop down. Another common characteristic of anamorphic lenses is that they generally have very poor close focus distance. You often need to use a diopter to get up close to your object and to stay in focus. Now, with the Laowa Anamorphic Zooms, they have a close focus distance of 1.5 feet for the 28-55 and 2 feet 7 inches for the 50-100, which makes it fairly easy to get in close, especially on the 28-55. I was able to capture some nice close-up B-roll for the documentary I'm working on without having to toss in a diopter. Now, these lenses do cover a Super 35 sensor, and in all the tests I did on the Red Komodo, there was no vignetting whatsoever on either lenses. In terms of the overall look and feel, I personally found that these lenses provide a clean and balanced look, even though they don't scream anamorphic until you start to see the flaring and oval bokeh. This may be a bit of a turnoff to a cinematographer that wants to meticulously craft his or her look and feel in camera. While the Laowa Anamorphic Zooms absolutely won't be confused with higher-end anamorphic lenses like Hawk, Atlas Orions, or Cooke anamorphics, the nanomorphs do, however, provide a nice starting point for someone who wants to push their shots in grading, rather than starting off with a more dirty image, chock full of character. Some may ask, what's the big deal about these lenses? They aren't loaded with character, they're a bit on the clinical side, and they're $3,000 a piece. My answer to that is, up until now, the only way to get anamorphic character on a pair of zoom lenses without spending tens of thousands of dollars was to use an adapter or a cheap filter. While those options do produce some interesting looks, they just don't cut it in my opinion. Zoom lenses, by nature, allow you to film much quicker, which makes the Laowa Anamorphic Zooms a completely viable option for filming run and gun work. For example, I needed to film B-roll for a documentary that I'm directing and producing about comic book shops, and instead of using the Canon FDs that we've been filming the entire documentary on, I decided to toss on the Laowa Anamorphic Zooms to shoot a set of B-roll at one of the locations. For this location, I was working solo and I didn't have much time on my hands, so using zooms was definitely the best way to go. I was able to move much quicker than as if I was shooting on primes, and the shorter focus distance of these zooms allowed me to get some nice detail shots without having to toss a diopter onto the front of the lens. It was also nice to pack just 2 lenses rather than an entire set of primes. That's definitely something to take into consideration when planning shoots, especially when working in solo or small crews. If I had to sum these lenses up with one word, that word would be balanced. The flexibility of these being zoom lenses makes up for the lack of anamorphic character in my opinion, and as I mentioned earlier, they can be dirtied up in post a little bit. The price point, size, and weight bridges the gap between ultra high-end, big-budget production anamorphic zooms and budget-friendly lenses aimed at indie filmmakers. Ultimately, I think that Laowa has done a great job with these lenses, and while I've yet to use the prime versions of the nanomorph lineup, these lenses could make a great addition to my kit. If you enjoy this review, please consider subscribing. If you'd like to watch more lens reviews, be sure to check out my playlist. Until next time, take care.